Hello and welcome to Sports Room. I'm Anirudh Madhavan and with me is veteran journalist Ayaz Memon. On today's episode, we'll talk about the India-South Africa test, the Pakistan-Australia test and the developments in the WFI. So Ayaz, we'll start off with the India-South Africa test at Centurion. It got over in 3 days. India lost by an innings and 32 runs, completely outplayed by the hosts. So do you think this was an aberration or do you think there is an issue of lack of skill?
I mean, when you look at India's track record in South Africa over the years, I mean, we've never won a series there, and this is supposed to be the conquest of the last frontier. That, of course, now been laid to rest. Even if we win the second test, we can't win the series. But the debacle, and you can't call it anything milder than that. This is a debacle. You lost in under 3 days, and it's been a right royal pasting, if you ask me. In batting, in bowling, in fielding, India was just not able to compete. And remember, on the first day, actually, the South Africans uncharacteristically dropped a couple of catches. Despite that, they went on to win this match. Two things come to mind. One is, of course, that they prepared very well. They had some of their some big guns are not there in the sense that it's not a very powerful, formidable side on paper. South Africa, they are very very powerful when they are playing at home. But India had all the big stars, minus of course Mohammad Shami, who's not there for the series. So that made a difference. But to this extent, I think, and Jadeja not being able to play. So you still felt, or one felt, that India would compete and compete hard because there's so much at stake. There's the reputation of players to protect, pride of playing for the country, pride of playing as a professional, and of course the objective of trying to win a series in South Africa for the first time. But I think it just kind of crumbled under the. I thought that South Africa showed a lot more character, toughness of character shown, or as best exemplified by Dean Elgar. They showed some really good young talent, Bedingham, also Nandre Berger, both debutants. I mean, too much has been written and made about, but India also had some debutants, and therefore, lack of experience and stuff. But these things don't cut ice when you're competing at the highest level, especially if you're coming from India, where almost just about everything is available to a cricketer to excel. So I thought that India were, lacking in self-belief, lacking in character, and certainly lacking in caliber.
So let's break it down further. We'll come to the bowling first. So I think Bumrah bowled well and Ashwin did what he could in those conditions. But Shardul Thakur and Prasidh Krishna, like you said, made his debut. They both looked out of their depth. And do you think, I'm talking about larger picture here, do you think this could be an indication of things to come for the future of Indian bowling in red ball cricket? Or do you think it's too premature to talk about that?
I mean, let's not be knee-jerk, I would say that, because Shardul has been, he's often gone for plenty, but he's also often picked up wickets. He was touted as the guy with the golden arm. Prasidh Krishna, you can nitpick about him only to an extent because this was his first match. He obviously felt the heebie-jeebies, the jitters, and I thought that perhaps the bowling changes affected by Rohit. They could have been perhaps a little smarter. This is, of course, in hindsight, especially, and as it was said so often, even on commentary after the break, when, they could have been put under more pressure, Elgar certainly, but they weren't, and they broke free, against Prasidh Krishna because he was a rookie. So I wouldn't, summarily dismiss them, but look at the young talent we're talking about, and Shardul is not exactly a spring chicken. But you look at Yashasvi Jaiswal, Shubman Gill, Shreyas Iyer, who also isn't a spring chicken. He's been around and playing for some time now. And Prasidh Krishna and Shardul Thakur, in terms of experience, far lesser than all the others. They were shown up, they were found wanting in conditions. And especially, yes, you're talking about fast bowlers, and there's a relevance and a validity to that question because the pitch helped the fast bowlers so much. So even if you're new, if you're under pressure, if you're this is your first match or you're still early in the game, you'll feel the onus on you. But even so, you have to be able to make use of the circumstances and the conditions when you have reached this level. And if that doesn't happen, then it poses issues for the captain, for the selectors, and for obviously everybody else who supports the Indian team.
Yeah, I think there is also, as a fan, there's a certain complacency because we've seen this Indian team and its fast bowlers over the past 5-6 years with Ishant, Umesh, Bumrah, Siraj, everyone. So seeing this kind of a performance from our quicks was a bit of a shock. But again, Krishna made his debut, and we can't write him off after one test. He's got a lot. Depends on if he plays the second test and what he does now. Avish Khan is into the squad, I think, and we still have the second test to go. And like you were saying, they'll have a chance to prove their character. But let's talk about the batting now. There was this brilliant century by KL Rahul in the first innings, and there was a defiant 70 odd by Virat Kohli in the second innings. But apart from that, all of them looked off color. So, what did you make of the batting performance or lack of it?
I think in the first inning they were completely hustled by Kagiso Rabada. I thought Rabada bowled splendidly. See, he's not spoken about in the same breath as one does, say, a Pat Cummins or a Mitchell Stark, or Mohammad Shami or Jasprit Bumrah or Jimmy Anderson. Usually people don't talk of Rabada for some strange reason. Look at his fantastic strike rate that he's got. He's got, I think, the most impressive strike rate in the contemporary game. And on his pitches, he's always been a match winner. He's got 280 plus wickets at very nominal cost and at a fantastic strike rate. So when he picked up those wickets in the first innings, India were already on the back foot. You can say that luck was not with India, lost the toss, had to bat in very challenging circumstances. But I think beyond a point, that doesn't make sense. You have to accept, unless you start accepting that you played badly and the other side played better, used the conditions better, showed better character, showed better spirit of enterprise, showed more determination, showed more grit. All of these, I'm using all these adjectives to show how matches are won or lost. The absence of all these attributes makes you lose matches. The presence of these attributes helps you win matches. And if I might add, at this stage itself, we are seeing that happen even in the series between Australia and Pakistan. In the second match, which got over at Melbourne, Pakistan had their opportunities, but they still lost the match. They were swamped in the first match. In the second, they came back strongly in bowling and in batting, but not good enough. And that stems back to the thing that to my contention that you can keep churning out excuses. Oh, but in Sena countries this happens and that happens and this. But for God's sake, you're preparing yourself to play in these countries even while you're growing up. So you can't, once you land up there, you can't say no, conditions have become so difficult that we can't play. I think that's becoming nonsensical, that kind of logic.
Yeah, so as you were saying, we'll talk about the Pakistan-Australia match now, and it looked for a long time that Pakistan were into it, and in the second innings, or in the fourth innings where they were chasing, they were, I think, 160 for 4 at one point, and they looked like they'll make a game out of it, but then they had a collapse and they lost their last 5 wickets for 18 runs. So, and Australia now wrap up the series 2-0. There's one game left, but they won. Once again, a dominant run at home for Australia, which, as an Indian, makes the Indian wins look even better now. Right?
Yes. Oh, of course. I mean, that's what I'm talking about. When India won those 2 series in Australia, and successive series in Australia, there was a show of, again, I'll use the word character, but there was defiance, there was character, there was cussedness, and there was a lot of self-belief. So even especially in the second series that we won in 2020-21, when a lot of the major players were injured or had to come back home, there was no Virat Kohli, there was no Ash. I mean, Shami got injured and so on. And yet, we turned the tables on Australia, having been bowled out for 36 in the first match at Adelaide, to turn it around so dramatically. It's one of the greatest series ever played in the history of Test cricket. So that does not just come as a matter of course. There has to be a strong will. There has to be a lot of confabulation within the playing group, a lot of talk and conversations as to how things can be done. I thought in the Centurion, India, there was a masterly century from KL Rahul, amongst the best we've seen. And he's got I think 7 out of his 8 centuries have come overseas. So he's obviously got great caliber and class. So too Virat in the second innings. He had 38 in the first innings, got beach of a delivery from Rabada. But some of the other batsmen just looked either loose or listless. And when you're playing against high quality attacks with Rabada and guys like those, or Pat Cummins or Stark and Hazelwood, there is the margin for error is just so narrow. We saw that when India and Australia played against each other in the World Test Championship final. We got swamped there, having beaten them earlier at home. So victory away from home is never easy, but these are things that need to be achieved if you want to be recognized amongst the finer players or the better teams or the best team or the greatest player. It doesn't come to you on a platter and just by hype and hoopla in the environment, in social media or on television or broadcast platforms, etc. I think these are plaudits that have to be earned. And I'm afraid that India just performed so poorly in South Africa that they really have to pull up their socks now, because it's not looking good at this point in time. The manner in which they were hammered.
Yeah, you spoke about the India Australia that series. I'll move on to the India Australia women's test, which the Indian women won, and they beat the Australia mighty Australians for the first time in Test cricket, and they'd beaten England a few days before that, both at home. So, what does such a win do for Harmanpreet Kaur and her women?
Well, it does. It does wonders for them. I think for the Indian women team, the current one, as well as young cricketers, young women cricketers coming up. Those Australia was the bugbear. Australia was the big psychological block that India has had in cricket. The women's team. Wherever we played Australia, we seem to have come off second best. In the T20 World Cup final, I was there in Melbourne a few years back, 2020, if I remember correctly, and we got trashed. I mean, having played so well to reach the final, we got trashed by Australia. And then we've seen in the Commonwealth Games and World Cups, wherever, when we ran into Australia, we ran into trouble. This time, we actually cut the ground from under Australia. Australia was a very strong team, and in this 5-day format, or the red ball format, I just thought that it was a fantastic performance by the Indian women. A show of strength again, which is the virtues that we didn't see in the men's team: self-belief, quality of batting and bowling, which was superior to Australia. Now you don't say that easily. So I think Indian women have gone over a major hump, the mental block that was there. And the other thing which obviously this win highlights is that, and not just for Indian women, here I can speak for women's cricket, that there need to be more red ball cricket between the competing teams, between India and Australia, India and England, England and Australia, and so on. There's just not enough red ball cricket being played by the women. So I think that is something that the Indians need to look at, or the administration, the ICC, as well as the BCCI and other boards. And because India is doing well, I think they'll find takers. They'll find, in terms of sponsorship and audience, both will. Everybody follows a winner. So if they start winning, then everything else will follow.
Yeah, and lastly, we're talking about women athletes. So we talk about women athletes in a different sport with the developments with the Wrestling Federation of India. So last time we spoke, we saw that Brij Bhushan Singh's man had won the WFI elections, and it seemed like everything was status quo. But then the sports ministry ended up suspending the federation, and now the IOA has formed a 3-member ad hoc committee to run the sport. So does this move inspire confidence in you, Ayaz, or have you seen such things in the past?
Well, I mean, look, my cynicism isn't washed down so easily. Yes, I mean, the suspension of the newly elected World Wrestling Federation of India, that group of body of people, itself tells you that fundamentally there was something wrong. I mean, if the choice of candidates and which was known, if this was going to be the eventuality, then maybe the interjection or the intervention could have been earlier. And why wasn't it there? And then now we've got, so earlier there was the government involved through the sports ministry. Then there was the IOA involved. Then the IOA took a back seat. Then the courts were involved. Then the police was involved. It's just become such a, rigmarole. There's a 3-member committee now appointed from the IOA. I hope something comes out of it, because for God's sake, this is the Olympic year. In wrestling, we hope to get medals. But right now, it seems to me that the situation is still in a shambles. So I don't know what and how urgently things can be put together or put in place again. But there is a clear lesson for all federations, for the sports ministry, for people who care about Indian sport, that there are ways and ways to, there are ways in which sporting disputes and conflicts can be handled. There are ways in which, things can be put right without dithering over it and delaying it for months on end and leading to demeaning protests on the road and stuff like that. And obviously, clearly, what's coming out is that our sports persons need to be treated with great respect. I mean, it's a tragedy that our medal winners have to go and return their medals or their awards or their Padma Shris. I mean, it just brings everything into disrepute, I think, and more than anything else, the sport suffers, and India's image suffers in the sport.
Yeah, completely agree with the fact that it breaks your heart to see the wrestlers have to give back something they've worked all their life for. But we just hope that this is the right step, a step in the right direction. And that's it for this episode of Sports Room. We'll see you next time.
Thanks, Anirudh.